Hi, I'm Chief Meteorologist Bill Mack, and in this digital conversation, we are reliving, rededicating ourselves to the memory, the glory that was, the 2003 ice storm. And joining me today are two familiar faces from that event. If you had power, you saw them a lot. Then Mayor Teresa Isaac from Lexington and Cliff Feltham from Kentucky Utilities. So again, welcome to our digital conversation here. You all ready to talk about this?
We're ready to talk.
We're ready.
All right.
We can't see the pictures behind us, so we're ready.
Yeah, believe me, you don't want to see them because if you dream at night, so you'll relive all of this all over again. Now, let's go back to that time 15 years ago. And as the event was beginning to unfold, we were getting all the predictions. What was going on with the city?
We activated the Emergency Operations Center early. It was Valentine's weekend, and so some people had been away, and we had to call them back in and say, you need to come back. We're opening the EOC immediately. And so we decided that every 4 hours we would do press conferences to let the community know this is what's happening, this is how we're going to restore power, this is who has power, and we would give safety warnings. And so every 4 hours we had KU and everyone else with us to give updates to the citizens. And of course some people could only receive it by radio.
Yeah. Because again, no power. Now, Cliff, what was going on over at Kentucky Utilities?
Well, this was, we had prepared physically and mentally before the storm even came through, and just kind of laid in wait to see what kind of damage was going to happen, because we knew probably it was going to be a damaging storm, and turned out that way. So at 4:30 in the morning, I was contacted and was told that it's as bad, if not worse, than what we thought it was going to be. Come join us at our operations center, and let's go from there.
Bring a sleeping bag.
Bring a sleeping bag. And so for the next 2 weeks, it was staying up on top of the storm and then joining the mayor at the Emergency Operations Center and reporting in every 4 hours.
How many folks within your area were without power at one time or another?
Well, this storm was just not Fayette County. It stretched across about 5 counties, starting in Anderson, moving through Woodford, Fayette, and on into Clark. But it was a very thin strip of that. It didn't get into Madison County. It pretty much stopped at the Clays Ferry Bridge and didn't really get much into Scott County. But a total number of outages that we had was roughly between 215,000 and 250,000.
Out of your, well, how big a percentage of that is KU? I mean, is like of all your folks?
Yeah, we serve all, with except a small finger in the south part of Fayette County. We serve all of Fayette County. So it was about 2/3 of Fayette County was without power during that storm.
Wow. Mayor Isaac, now as the city was, assessing what was going on, how did the coming days go about? What were the things that the city, what were the priorities? What was to get stuff back going?
When we were looking at hospitals and nursing home first, we wanted to make sure they had generators, that they had power, that people that had medical emergencies were taken care of. Then we made sure the shelters were opened up, and so we got people to the shelters, and we really prioritized every day what were the most pressing needs that day. And then we had people in the Emergency Operations Center that could take care of that. And we really set the standard for all later administrations that when you have an event like this, you have to get out there every 4 hours and let the public know what's happening, because you try to be a voice of calm when a lot of chaos is happening around you. And I can't say enough about how cooperative KU was with us. I think when we first realized how bad it was, I was approached by people who wanted to come in and also work with KU, and I think sometimes KU doesn't use union workers, but Cliff made an exception for me, and we brought in union workers that also helped to get the power back on.
Now, in ranking of Lexington events, where does this one come?
Well, the ice storm was definitely a challenge for us. There were many challenging events that happened when I was mayor, but this ranks right up there as a real test for the community. And the community really pulled together. People checked on their neighbors. People were very compassionate. People were very helpful. People were patient when we asked them to be patient. And as the power came back on, as I think you remember in your neighborhood, people came out and applauded in the streets and took coffee to the people that were getting the power back on. So it was an interesting experience for our city.
Going along the same, what were the responses from your folks out in the field? What were you hearing from them as things were developing?
Well, part of it was frustration, because they would there was the initial day or 2 days when we had to make an assessment of just how damaging it was out there, and it was tremendously damaging. So then, just like the city, we had to set our priorities for where do we get things on first. That was when we had the discussion about the veins and arteries and how you have to restore the thing that could get the most people back on first, and then you go to the smaller lines and finally get people that are on the end of the line on, unfortunately, at the end of the road rather than the beginning of the road, but that's just the way the system is set up and the way it works. But it was a prioritization, and then we realized that, boy, this is going to be more than our crews can handle. We need to get other reinforcements in here. And so we got them in as quickly as we could, but it was a tremendous workload really for that first week. And the frustration came when our guys would repair a line and have it back up and restore it, and then another tree limb would come down maybe 100 yards away from where they were working and pull down what they had just repaired. And so there was a lot of that frustration because the storm wasn't over really for 3 or 4 days, at least the effects of the melting ice off of the tree limbs. So it was a battle out there to try and restore and keep it restored so that people could get their lives back together.
If you can call, what was the best story that came back from your folks?
Well, like the mayor said, there were a lot of cases where people equated having a truck on their street as us getting our power back on, which was, that's correct, that you're pretty close to getting that, but sometimes those trucks were getting an area back on that was 2 or 3 blocks away and people didn't see those trucks, so they equated that with I'm not getting my power back anytime soon. But in the areas where our folks went in and were working, you know, if there were people in houses, they would watch and just kind of gawk and see how we were progressing. And then when the power came back on, first thing they did was come out and congratulate them and say thank you. And as I said, sometimes bring them coffee and just praise their work because they worked hard.
What was the cost to the city?
I think the total cost, KU, the city, and the surrounding counties was over $60 million to get everything restored, repaired, cleaned up. And
how do you, I mean, you don't have a rainy day fund that has $60 million in it.
Oh, no.
I mean, yeah.
Oh, no. We had state and federal assistance.
From first to last, how was the length of the outage?
It was about 2 weeks. We got some people on, well, in the vicinity of 12, 13, 14 days. The number came less than 50 those last few days. And again, they were kind of at the end of the system. So it's, like I say, that's just the way the system works. And if a line's down between where the major source is and where you are at the end of the line, you've got to get that line back up before you can get power restored.
We talked about at one point what people were responsible for versus what KU is responsible for. You know, and it became a controversial toward the end. The goosenecks or whatever what are they called?
Weatherhead.
The weatherhead or masthead.
Now you're talking about me.
Yeah. Well, the weatherhead was the topic of conversation during that ice storm because the homeowners or the property owners didn't know that they owned a weatherhead. Didn't know what it was to begin with. So we had an education process over those 2 weeks of this is what a weatherhead is. These are the responsibilities for what you're responsible for and what KU is responsible for, and making the attachment and making the connections and hooking everything up. And so there were a lot of people that were surprised that they needed to have an electrician replace that weatherhead, which is the connector on the outside of the house where the line comes into the house or the building, whatever building. And if it was damaged and needed to be replaced or repaired.
All right. Teresa, best and worst memories from 15 years ago?
The worst memories were trying to make sure that people that had urgent medical needs were taken care of. I can remember even I drove things to Red Cross shelters that were medical supplies that were needed because you wanted to make sure that no one suffered a death or a serious injury because we couldn't get the medical supplies to them. The best memories were just how people came together, how they were patient, how they were kind to each other, how they checked on elderly neighbors. And I think it's an event we wouldn't want to go through again, but the city really showed how it could work together. And I think all of the babies that were born, you know, we have those memories of the ice storm babies now.
Cliff, same question, best and worst memories.
Well, the worst memory that I have is hearing the sound of that storm. And the sound of that storm was the crack, crack, crack that you would hear in the distance, and then all of a sudden a crash. And you knew that it was another tree limb that just couldn't take the weight of the ice anymore and came down, which meant it's coming down in our lines. And so that was, I heard that so much. I live in a neighborhood that's got a lot of trees, so I heard that so much in my neighborhood, and then the other neighborhoods that I drove through and into just to make assessments as we were going through and doing our work. So that's the worst part of it. The best part of it was when it came to the end. and we really could make an assessment of how good we did or how bad we did or what we needed to change just to get ourselves right.
All right, so you see us on TV, and we are forecasting ice storm. The words actually come out. And what are your thoughts at that point? It's like, what are you thinking at that point?
Well, you're trying to prepare for the worst. You're trying to make sure you've got your emergency operations center up and running, that you've got your request into federal and state government so you can get assistance from FEMA, from the Division of Forestry, where they actually came over and helped us cut trees. So as long as you activate early and you're prepared, then you're able to help your city through an emergency like that.
Yeah. Since you're now retired, are you secretly giggling?
Well, I guess, but you know, I understand what they're going through and how they're preparing. And as the mayor said, you've got to get yourself prepared for the worst. And we learned a lot in preparing for the worst, because that kind of set a high water mark for us in terms of how you deal with these large number of outages and what it's going to take to get all those restorations done. So it's I think we're better streamlined now, and would do a better job here in 2018 than we did in 2003.
Terrific. Anything else y'all want to add?
Thank you for predicting it for us.
Yes.
It's a team.
Let's keep the ice at less than 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Tom and I had that, as we were in the 3 days leading up to it, it's like we were sending notes, and Tom had just gotten here at that point. And we were sending notes back and forth to each other. It's like, good God, this can't be happening. Because the numbers we were seeing, they were just mind-boggling. It's like it literally is something you do not ever expect to see, and there you see it. It happened. So with that wraps up this digital conversation. We again hope that never going through something like that meteorologically again, but if we do, know that we are prepared. I'm Chief Meteorologist Bill Meck. My thanks to Teresa Isaac and Cliff Felton.